Thank you.
All right. I think at this point, we will turn it over to Bryce to introduce today's program.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Araceli. Thank you, Julia. So today our presentation is from Megan Vandemark. She works for the Portland Audubon as the Backyard Habitat Certification Program co-manager. She has a master's in sustainable development, a bachelor's in journalism and women's studies, and has taken coursework in landscape technology. Prior to Portland Audubon, she worked for years at Friends of Trees, where she coordinated their Southwest Washington tree planting and tree care efforts. She is currently a commissioner on the City of Portland's Urban Forestry Commission and is drawn to collaborating with diverse communities that make up our region in order to build all the stories of our urban forest. Please join me in welcoming Megan.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. If everyone's okay, I have so much I want to talk to you about, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I might just jump right in to talk about backyard habitat. And what I'm really excited about is, for those that don't know, we recently expanded our program into Forest Grove, so I'm really excited to share more about it with you. Am I able to just go ahead and share my screen with everyone? Okay. All right. And then I'm going to put this in presenter mode. Can everybody see my screen? Thumbs up. Okay, awesome. So I'm just going to jump right in. So as Bryce shared, I'm Megan Vandemark. I work for Portland Audubon and I co-manage the Backyard Habitat Certification Program. And what I'm going to just talk to you all about today is briefly just talk about what the program is, kind of the why of the program, why we think building habitat is important, things that you all can do, and if we have time, some Q&A. So to start here, I always think it's important just to share a little bit of the context. So the program, as I mentioned, I'm the co-manager. So it's a program that's co-managed by two nonprofits, Portland Audubon and Columbia Land Trust. And normally we have about 10 minutes just to talk about our organization. So I won't go into that level of depth, but I always encourage folks to learn more about both organizations. But I do like to share just the context of our missions. So Columbia Land Trust, which has been around for several decades, their mission is to conserve and care for the vital lands, waters, and wildlife of the Columbia River region through sound science and strong relationships. And that's where my co-manager, Susie, works. And as I mentioned, I work for Portland Audubon. We've been around since 1902, so for a while. And our mission is to inspire all people to love and protect birds, wildlife, and the natural environment upon which life depends. So to start with just an overview of what is backyard habitat. So as I mentioned, it's a unique partnership between our two nonprofits, and it actually started as a joint collaboration between both of us. And I always like to just share our origin story because I think it really speaks to the program. So in the mid-2000s, there were a group of neighbors that were working to do some restoration on a local park in Southwest Portland. They were doing a lot of noxious weed removal. And in the process, they realized that as they were removing all of this ivy, that it was growing back from the adjacent properties, and that in order to really do the work in a comprehensive way, that they need to engage all of the yards that were adjacent to the park. So they went out and approached the neighbors to engage them to see if they'd be kind of interested. And that's where the seed of the program started, was engaging people to do kind of habitat work in their yards. And so the program kind of officially launched in 2009 in Portland and has continued to grow since then. We are now serving the 4-county area. So we work in Clark, Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties. We just completed our multi-year expansion this year, where we expanded into Forest Grove, Cornelius, Hillsborough, and Sherwood, and we expanded a little further east into Troutdale and Wood Village in East Multnomah County. So it's been a kind of a story of growth. The mission of our program is to provide tools, resources, and recognition for community members as they create habitat where they live, as well as where they gather. And of course, to then connect people back to the work of our larger organizations. So to talk about, sorry, I'm moving around all of your beautiful faces so I can make certain I see my words here. So it's always helpful to give people just a little bit of insight into how does the Backyard Habitat program work. So maybe all of you today will be like, that was so inspiring. I want to enroll my yard or maybe my place of worship within the program. So you go to our website, backyardhabitats.org, and you can sign up. And there is a small one-time cost. It has been $35. We're about to launch a sliding scale fee because we don't want cost to be a barrier to participation. And so you sign up, and then what happens is we connect you to one of our habitat technicians, and they schedule a time to come out and walk your site with you and kind of note your site's particular conditions, what your goals are, and how those fit within kind of our elements of building habitat. And at that time, they give you a packet that's full of resources, including a coupon booklet that is kind of pictured here. On the left, it provides discounts on native plants at 10 local nurseries and provides a lot of additional resources. You also get this great in progress sign to kind of help you let your neighbors know what you're doing. And after that visit, the technician sends you a customized report that's very specific to your yard and with recommendations of what you all talked about and what you can do. And then we kind of just continue to check in. And we will do follow-up calls. We can do additional remote conversations. We do check-in emails, etc. And at some point you might say, hey, I've done everything that you all kind of had outlined. I think I'm ready for certification. And so we have a trained volunteer that comes out to your property. Maybe one of you will all become trained volunteers. And you check on, they kind of re-walk your yard together. And if you've kind of implemented our kind of certification criteria elements, you get this beautiful sign here in the lower left-hand corner. And then we also send you additional benefits like discounts off backyard bird shop, etc. And then that certification lasts for 3 years, at which time you can renew for free online. So that's kind of the outline of the program. And the folks on the right pictured here are both people that got certified just this year. And they look so happy. And so the 5 elements of the program that I kind of referenced are what we kind of do is we work with people to encourage them to remove noxious plants or nuisance weeds that have kind of been identified by local like soil and water conservation districts and city governments, to plant locally native plants, reduce or if possible eliminate the use of pesticides, take specific actions to support wildlife, and to manage stormwater, also known as rainwater, on site. And a question of who can participate in the program. So we do focus on sites that are 1 acre or smaller, unless it's a community site. So if someone maybe has a school that is interested in the program, we will work with them. So we work with private residences. It can be either a renter or an owner. Multifamily housing complexes are enrolled, various places of worships, businesses, nonprofits, community gardens, a lot of different places can enroll in the program. And I've kind of talked about their certification levels, and certification isn't it's something that people have to do. It's something that some people like to work toward. It kind of creates a goalpost for them. And we have these 3 levels that kind of work you kind of up to doing more to build habitat. So kind of silver is you do a little, gold is a little bit more, and platinum is like you've done a lot. Like those folks there look like they live in a forest. So there's just, it's kind of a reward system for those that are really incentivized by that. And these, again, are all people that got certified this year. And, you know, you might be asking if you're not already convinced. So, okay, that sounds great. Why is building habitat important? And it's always, I think, important for us to kind of step back and get at the why. So some quick just numbers to share. So one is that we live near the confluence of 2 major rivers, and we also live within the Pacific Flyway. So it's a very biodiverse area. And within our area, there's 367 different species of animals that call our region home. And there's also 219 bird species that migrate through. And I always just think about it, right? We all need habitat, ourselves included, right? We need food to eat, a place to sleep, a place to call home. And we often even need those things when we're just passing through. So we're kind of trying to work to, you know, support the diversity of our community. And meanwhile, that's happening, unfortunately, and I don't think anyone's surprised to hear this, we are seeing a lot of decline. And there's some really valuable reports, if you want to read more about it, that came out. National Audubon put out a pretty staggering report last year about some impacts that we're seeing. But one of them, this is a local organization that does national work focused on pollinators, the Xerxes Society. Their research is finding that approximately 30 species of bees are labeled as possibly extinct or critically imperiled. Meanwhile, we're really seeing a reduction in our bird species. There's a 25% decline in common bird species. And within Oregon, we're seeing that within the last 40 years, there's a 50% population decline in common birds, right? So these are birds that we think of all the time. And we're seeing a decline, including in our state bird, the western meadowlark. And, you know, some of these things you might be familiar with. Of course, like there is a loss of trees and wild areas due to development, climate change, also introduced species of plants and animals, right? That's where something can become invasive in an area, but also human hazards. And some of the things in our yards that folks may not know are as detrimental as they are outdoor domestic house cats. Always a sensitive topic, but one that we see a lot of impact due to. The next one can always be a little startling. That's actually window strikes. So birds don't have the ability to tell that it's a window. It often reflects black habitat, so they often fly into windows. Pesticides, and then also noxious weeds. And so if folks don't know, Portland Audubon has a wildlife care center that's open 365 days a year. And the 3 main reasons that birds are admitted into the wildlife care center are: number 1, outdoor house cats; number 2, windows; and number 3 are actually cars. So those are big causes of decline. So sometimes people will say, does 1 yard matter? And I always say, it's all about compounding. So if you kind of look at it, maybe 1 island over here, it would make a difference. It makes a huge difference when you add it together. And so I'll share this stat in a minute, but we have nearly 7,000 people enrolled in our program. So I think about that as all of those yards or sites connected. And in the green areas, you can really start to see that cumulative effect, right? So if you're a bird, where are you going to want to go? Where are you going to be able to get your needs met, right? So what our goal is to fill it in, and we're really starting to see that happen. But I also always like to talk about every yard as a person, right? Or people. And these are all people that just got certified within our program this past year. In the bottom row, 3 or 4 of these photos are actually folks within Washington County. And so it's also a cumulative effect of people. And so I like to think about both the land side and the people side, because it's both. So to just hit some quick highlights. So as I mentioned, we have 6,800 total sites enrolled across the 4-county area and growing. That equates to about 1,600 acres when you combine it. 300 of those are community sites. About 2,000 of those properties have been certified, so about a third. And we've had a ton of volunteer hours donated, and a lot of plants have gone in the ground as a result. So it really does add up. So then the question is, how can you help in your own backyard? And we always think about backyard, right? Maybe it is just a yard, but maybe someone doesn't have a yard, right? It could be another place. And so I'm going to kind of lead through that, thinking about things that you can do in line with the program. And of course, one thing you can always do is just enroll in the program, and we can do this with you more one-on-one. But a big thing is to remove those priority weeds. And the reason for that is that noxious weeds are weeds that really spread rapidly, and they dominate areas, so they displace other plants. And there's kind of a whole list of what the impacts of them can be, right? But a big thing is that they can change the ecology, and they can really, in essence, choke out other plants from growing. And so being able to just work to remove those in areas that you care for is important. And within our program, if you're saying you enroll in our program and you're working towards certification, we kind of have a tier of weeds. And so in order to be certified as silver, you would need to just remove any of the weeds that have been identified as silver level weeds. You, of course, could remove all of them, but some of them are a bit harder to address. So just removing those priority weeds. The next one, which I'll spend a little more time on, is just planting native plants. And within the program, there's sometimes a misconception that you only can have native plants, and that's not true. We really try to make it possible for people. So we encourage people to plant locally native plants, and that to be certified within the program, all you would have to do is have 5% of your yard donated or dedicated to native plants. And then you can kind of build up from there. And there's always a question of why native plants and native to where. And so what we're talking about is our kind of Willamette Valley ecoregion that you can see here. And you know, a focus on that is just the plants within this ecoregion have similar needs in terms of soil, temperature, elevation, and weather conditions. So these are plants that are adapted and have co-evolved in our area. And we use the Portland Plant List as the guide for what is considered locally native. It's a 200-page document, so it's pretty comprehensive. I haven't even read the entire thing. And we also are talking about plants that were here before European colonization, but the kind of why native species in particular, and this again isn't because other species are bad, it's just that native plant species really kind of have extra bang for their buck. And a big part of it is that there's a lot of species that we know that are generalist, but and they can kind of they're the folks out there that don't have any dietary restrictions, but there are a lot of creatures within the animal kingdom that do. And so 90% of insects actually depend on native plants to survive. They're specialists, so they co-evolved with a plant or several plants. And so they actually rely on those plants specifically for their survival. Also, 96% of terrestrial, i.e. land birds, feed on insects and have that really specialized relationship. And so it's all kind of interconnected, but native plants, because of that coevolution, are really important within that. And this is just a quick slide that kind of talks about some of that. It's a lot of numbers and words, but it really shows how, like, our Oregon white oak, also known as Gary oak, that there's, you know, 24 birds that are relying on it and 10 mammals. It doesn't even speak to insects. The bitter cherry, our salmonberry, our blue elderberry, all of these plants that are really kind of biodiverse powerhouses. So native plants really can pack a punch. And we also talk within our program about planting different layers, canopy layers. So what we mean by that is kind of focusing on the right side of this slide. So when we talk about canopy layers, we're talking about kind of thinking of a forest, right? So you have the large trees, the small trees, the large shrubs, small shrubs, and the ground cover layers. And all of those canopy layers meet different needs for wildlife. And you can kind of see on the left, it talks about some of the birds that rely on different layers of the canopy. And a helpful example of this is just bird feeding behaviors. So birds have different, they're kind of, they feed themselves in different ways. So you have seed and berry eaters, you have ground feeders, you have foliage gleaners, aerial foragers, and predators. And so they have different needs and they rely on different layers of the canopy. So that's why we encourage planting multiple canopy layers within our program so that you can support that dynamic habitat and you can support more birds within it. Okay, so I've talked to you about how you can remove those priority weeds and you can plant locally native plants from multiple canopy layers. The next thing is just reducing the use of pesticides. I think we all probably know that pesticides can have a really negative impact. So reducing or eliminating the use of pesticides in your yard is really helpful. And even if you don't enroll in our program, I always encourage people to check out this resource, Grow Smart, Grow Safe. So it's a resource that it kind of outlines here. It shows the hazard level of a product. So maybe you're thinking to use something on your yard, you can actually look it up and it's going to tell you what the hazard level of is of that product. So that's just something that we guide people to use within our program. The next, and this is kind of an overwhelming slide, so my apologies, is we encourage folks to take different actions in their yard to support wildlife, because all of these things are very impactful. And so I'll kind of briefly just mention them. There's a photo associated with each. So one is just having a wildlife water feature. Birds like us, as well as beneficial insects, require water for various reasons, like, you know, bathing is even one of them, as well as drinking. So by having a wildlife water feature and maintaining it regularly is really beneficial. Installing a bird or bat nest box, their insect nesting habitat. So what we're really talking about is beneficial insects and or mason bees. So these are very gentle native bees that are like super pollinators. And so these are actually nesting habitat for mason bees. The next one here, this is what's known as a snag or a standing dead tree. This is a little more dramatic than most, but trees actually, once they've died, and whether they're standing or have fallen, which is known as a nurse log, provide a lot of habitat for a lot of different birds and insects, and actually other creatures such as squirrels and the like. So they actually sometimes can provide more habitat value dead than alive. And so by leaving dead wood on site, you actually really benefit wildlife habitat. The next one here is just reducing outdoor lighting. So particularly during bird migration. So birds actually, their ability to migrate and their sensory systems are impacted by light that's reflected up. So either reducing lighting or having intentional lighting. This lighting here, actually, it's kind of hard to see, but it directs down. And then the color and the tone of the lighting can matter. So just having thoughtful lighting, if you're using lighting, can really support birds' ability to migrate. Then the next thing here is that reducing window collisions. And as I mentioned, right, birds don't have the ability to understand the habitat is ended because it's often reflected back. And I am someone that works for Audubon, and I have actually noticed bird strikes since working from home. And so there's a lot of different things you can do and applications you can put on your window, including fun things that involve kids like this, that can actually make it so birds can see that there's a window and reduce window strikes. And then the other things here are, one, you can just plant a pollinator meadow and you'll always look this happy when you do it. And then the final thing here is the cat issue, which is always a sensitive one. Just being able to, if you have an outdoor cat, considering just being more thoughtful about when it's outside, or eventually transitioning it inside. Or you can do a catio, which is a cat patio. And you can learn more about that, but having cats inside is actually one of the biggest things you can do to help local bird populations. And then finally, managing stormwater, aka rainwater on site. Is really beneficial. And so a big thing is just large trees. Large trees store a lot of water. And so planting large trees is really helpful. These next two here, I always give kind of a Washington County caveat, is that Washington County system is a bit different. So this is a where appropriate, but disconnecting downspouts, if appropriate, where the water drains into your yard, can be beneficial, and in particular if it's draining into a rain garden. And this is something that our technicians have been trained on to talk to folks about whether it's appropriate. You can always remove lawn or impermeable surfaces, right? This is just so the water can soak into the ground. It's really beneficial. We've paved over a lot of things, and so the water and all those subsequent pollutants run off. So having it actually filter through kind of the ground is beneficial. You can install an eco roof. We always joke that almost no one does this. I think this might be the one person in the program that did, but still you can install an eco roof. Another little thing that you can do is leave the leaves that fall. And this doesn't mean that if leaves fall in your yard, you have to leave them where they fall. A lot of people, what they do is they'll rake them to areas that they've planted with native plants, and they'll leave that as a mulch layer. And the reason for this is a lot of beneficial insects actually nest in this layer, and you'll see birds go through and they'll flip the leaves over going after it. And so a lot of them kind of overwinter in the leaf layer. Also, it just is kind of like a natural mulch, and it's going to help improve the soil. And then the final two things are just reducing lawn irrigation. And when you are watering plants that you have, because plants do need establishment watering, doing it early in the morning or later in the evening. And then just using eco-friendly lawn care practices. So those are a lot of the different things that you can do. And to kind of just close out, I think this is a fun slide. So this is as of July, so you don't get to see it filled in for Hillsborough and Cornelius and Forest Grove yet. But these are all the folks that are in the program, and our goal is to continue to fill it in. You can see where we've been the longest, and our goal is to really fill out this map for everywhere that we serve. And I always like to just share that we're able to do this work through a lot of unique partnerships. One of the partnerships we're really excited about is that we've been working really closely with Central Cultural, which is, your all's neighbors. They're right there in Cornelius. And we've been working with them on a lot of programming. And we work with a lot of different local organizations, government entities, schools, et cetera, to really ensure that as many people can be engaging in this work as possible. So I don't know if we have time for questions, but sorry for kind of breezing through that, but I'll stop sharing my screen. And if there are questions, I'm happy to try to answer some.
I have to admit that I have, let me just share this real quick. I participated in the program when I lived in Southwest Portland, and it was a wonderful program. I can answer just a couple of Zoom chat questions from my own experience, but yeah, they have a volunteer come out and walk through your yard and evaluate basically the metrics that they have for the different tiers and help you come up with some ideas for how to move up the tiers, improve things. I made it up to the gold level before we moved by removing ivy, removing some holly trees that we had. We were lucky enough to have some major Douglas fir trees in our yard, but it's a great opportunity to learn more about what's in your yard, the kind of plants that are around us, in our environment. And some of them are really cool, very pretty plants. And it was a great opportunity to nerd out about nature for a while. So.
Well, that's great to hear. And I see Amy's questions as well. And so I did want to speak to just COVID protocols really quick within that. So we do, just to clarify, we do have trained technicians that come for the initial visit. And then the next visit, some people do get certified during their initial site visit, but some folks, it can take years. Maybe you have really persistent blackberry, like my neighbor. And so you have to work at it. But we do have COVID protocols, and we've been continuing to adjust them. So some of our technicians, I will share right now, are actually taking a break from doing site visits. They have just felt that they didn't feel comfortable with rising COVID cases, and we want to be very respectful of that. What our other technicians have done is they've been giving people the option. So they've had two options. So it really depends on which of our technicians it is. The person can either stay inside, they do the visit, and some of our technicians will like call or video in, or they'll call them after. And that said, some people are like, no, I want to join you in the yard. Can I just wait until I have the other option, which is totally available. And then some of our technicians are also offering the options to do the physically distant site visit. So, and we send out these guidelines in advance because we take them very seriously to ensure that everyone has to wear masks, to ask to have as few people as possible outside, and to physically distance during the visit. So, there have been options. We did suspend our visits for many months, and we are just trying to be very adaptive because ultimately I care more about people being safe. So I would never want anyone to do anything if they didn't feel safe. I think you have a question, Paul.
Yes, I've heard for a few years now that the monarch butterfly's migration north of Mexico is hindered because we've eliminated its main source of milkweed plant. Is that true? And is that something that needs to be eliminated or let go in your backyard?
So I'm going to say milkweed is a complex issue. And weirdly, you wouldn't think it is. So it is true, right, that monarchs are being impacted. One of the interesting things, though, and we really have taken our guidance from the Xerces Society because of all the pollinator research they do, they have actually recommended that within our program that people not plant milkweed because this is actually not its native range within our specific area. So what I would recommend is, you certainly can, but we try to follow their guidance. And I would highly recommend going to their website. I'm going to chat it in the box what their name is because sometimes the pronunciation can be a bit hard. So if you look that up and just look up their recommendations about milkweed, it's really great. Also, the question of where can you find the Portland plant list? So you can buy it and Audubon sells it, but you can actually just Google Portland plant list and it's searchable. You can do Control F and you can look to see if a plant is within it. We do provide much more condensed lists to people because it's really bulky, and just because a plant is native does not mean you can find it locally. So there'll be like some really obscure plants and people will be like, I tried to find it, and I'll be like, yeah, it's kind of hard to come by, but you can find it for free online and print it out. And also just to reiterate, people can also, and Bryce is more than welcome to share, you can always reach out to me with questions. It's literally my job to help answer questions and make certain people feel successful. Yes, Paul.
So follow-up question, once you have turned a yard into a backyard native habitat, how much or what are the possibilities of attracting the less desirable raccoons and skunks and possums, et cetera, that do more damage to like homes, et cetera, to their yard? How does that increase if you have a native backyard?
Yeah, I don't know if I know. I think it's so case by case. I think I would be making I would be trying to make a mass correlation. I will say that I had raccoons well before I planted native plants, and I still have them. So it's a bit hard. I think it really depends. And yeah, that's my honest answer. I think there's certain things in partnership with some of our other partners that we really encourage people to try to at least coincide with. Beavers are one in particular. That's not something everyone encounters, but the program really is more specifically focused on, you know, birds and pollinators. But yes, you may have raccoons, but it's more, I think it's less about what's in your yard and whether there's a raccoon population nearby than whether you have native plants or not. I don't know if that answered that, but hopefully it did. I don't know how much time I get for answering questions, so someone else might need to guide me. I don't want to keep you all hostage with habitat if you need to move on.
I think we could probably do one more question if there is one.
I don't think I see any. So I will,
I want to ask a question.
Yes.
So you limited it to 1 acre pieces. What if you have a little bit bigger piece and you know, like we kind of live out in the country, but I'm into, you know, we get a lot of birds and stuff. I'd like to see more of that coming in. Part of my land is in like a little pasture and stuff. And then I know we have that yellow noxious weed.
Yeah.
That I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, so the only reason that we limited it to that is just because of scale of our recommendations. What I would actually highly recommend for the larger sites, and we do this a lot, is if you're not familiar with Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District, we work with them really closely. And so oftentimes we just recommend people to go to them because honestly, particularly if it's a larger site, they can sometimes provide resources that we can't, particularly if it's a larger site and there's a noxious weed that they are prioritized in a removal. So I would reach out to their urban conservationist. You can find her info on their website, but it's Brita Pajunas, and she's really great and they can offer more resources. We do still say though, you can always there is maybe more information than you want on our website about other things that you can do as well. So we always recommend that. It's just that we kind of had to set a bar because then beyond it, it gets it gets really big to try to take on their recommendations. But Tualatin SWCD is a really great resource and can maybe sometimes even provide financial assistance, particularly for weed removal. And I'll just chat my email here as well. So if anybody has questions that they didn't want to ask or you think of later, please feel free to just reach out to me. I'm happy to chat with you. Clearly, I love what I do, so I'm happy to talk to you and answer questions that you have. And I also just really appreciate that you all invited me to present and to share with you all. Thank you for what you all do for the community as well.
Thank you so much, Megan, for sharing your organization with us. I think that's definitely something that Forest Grove could embrace out here.